Welcome to Commander Central, episode 200. And today we are going to be basically doing a listener and mailbag episode. I'm Dana.
And I'm Max.
Max, how's it going, man?
It's going, another day in paradise in my house.
We're surviving the stay-at-home pandemic situation, but episode 200, that's something.
It's something, that's a huge something in my opinion.
It is a pretty big deal. That has had me, the thought of recording this and the fact that we did 200 episodes has had me in a good mood pretty much all day thinking about that.
Yeah, same here.
That's pretty insane. That's just a crazy milestone. I thought 100 was a big deal, and I guess it wasn't like I thought we weren't going to hit 200, but it seemed like it was so far away. We hit 200. That's nuts.
We hit 200. I mean, yeah, we've been doing 2 shows a week for about a year now, but that's still
pretty crazy.
It's still 200.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, a lot of shows don't get to 10 or 20, and 200, that's a milestone for sure. I'm pretty proud.
Yeah.
So, anything exciting going on in your life before we jump into some of these questions?
This past weekend, it's been nice out here in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Summer is coming, spring is here. I tried rollerblading for the first time since, I think, high school.
How did that go?
I fell a lot.
You didn't shatter yourself like Mr. Glass or anything, right?
No. I live kind of near elementary school, so I slowly glided over there and then just kind of skated up and down their sidewalk. So every time I fell, I'd fall into grass.
Okay,
so I wouldn't get scraped up.
Sure.
But unlike riding a bike, I forgot how to do this.
Yeah, I can see how that would be much trickier.
But practice will make perfect again, and luckily, my roommate is we're hockey fans, so this will give us something to do after work now and on the weekends. Yeah,
I mean, since, going out to public places with people really isn't an option, we have to kind of improvise here and make our own fun.
Yeah, and we're lucky, at least in Eau Claire and Wisconsin, we have a very nice statewide bike pass system.
We do, for sure.
That runs from one end, the northern tip of the state to the southern tip of the state, and in our area, in the Eau Claire area, it's huge. You can go 20-some miles without leaving the city jurisdiction on it, so that will definitely be a fun thing to do on a nice warm day this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, it'll force us to kind of do things that we took for granted before a little bit, so I'm kind of in the same boat as you. I've got my bike. I've not tried rollerblading. I'm not that insane, but getting my bike out, doing that kind of thing, it has been kind of nice having to, not fall back on the same, well, let's just go out and get some food or go to a bar or something. The fact that you have to do a little bit things outside your maybe comfort zone or your knee-jerk easy reaction zone might be the better way to phrase it. It's been different, and I kind of appreciate that.
Yeah.
We got to play some games on camera. We didn't actually stream anything, although we're talking about doing that probably in the next few weeks here, but we did play some on Saturday, and you got to deal... Do you remember the number, how much damage it was?
I do, but I'd like to talk about that later in the show, because that's going to be one of my answers to these questions.
Cool, all right. That was in fact, pretty memorable. Well, if you out there in listener land want to reach out to us, maybe a question that we don't get to today, we can do 1 or 2 listener questions and shows down the road as well to catch up if you didn't get a chance to write to us. How would you do that, Max?
You can hit us up on Twitter at CMDR Central. You can find us on Facebook and message us there, CMDR Central. You can leave comments on our YouTube videos over at youtube.com/CMDR Central. And if you are a patron or become a patron, you can message us over at patreon.com/CMDR Central.
So should we just jump into answering these questions?
Let's do it. So we'll just kind of preface this here. For episode 200, we did ask our patron supporters in our Slack, our chat system, kind of like Discord, for these questions. So unlike our previous mailbag episodes, we didn't post this on Facebook. We didn't post it on Twitter. These were to the people who are in that chat room chatting with us every day. So we just want to do something special for them. Yeah.
And we also, I'll make a kind of a bit of a teaser announcement. We're in the process of doing something pretty cool for patron supporters as well that involves, I've had to get a hold of a couple different artists for different things. So we've seen some sketches, and we're midway through the process. I won't announce what it's going to be yet, but in the next couple weeks, we should have some more concrete information about that thing we're going to send out to all our supporters as well. So that one I'm also pretty excited about. The art looks pretty cool.
Yes, I am super excited by this super secret project.
And yours is my favorite, actually.
Really? I like yours the most.
Oh, thanks, man. Okay, let's jump into this.
Let's do it.
First question we have here is from CDM. CDM asks, what was your worst non-magic related Magic Fest / GP experience and why? And he means got sick, bad location, bad travel, hotel wasn't good, that kind of thing. Coming back from Vegas, I think it was the first year, I got airsick, and
Oh,
I tend to get motion sick relatively easily anyway, so it wasn't even necessarily that shaky of a flight. But if there is much turbulence, I do tend to get nauseous and motion sick. I combat that by not eating, 10 hours before I fly just to be sure. And I was, smart and didn't eat 10 hours before we flew that time because like the last 20 minutes coming into Minneapolis, like I was sitting next to you, I believe.
you were, yeah.
I was basically like just dry heaving because there wasn't even a bag. Like we
Nope.
didn't even have like a vomit bag in the back of the seats because like, we looked. I even had you dig through yours. So I just sat there like quietly dry heaving to myself for what seemed like 8 or 10 hours.
And I now I remember all this because I am one of those people that if someone starts to dry heave or vomit, I instantaneously start to do the
Oh,
same thing. So like I'm sitting there trying to be like, "Hey, you okay, buddy?" Also while not looking at you or trying to listen to you because I'm going to start throwing up and we have nothing to throw up into except our
oh,
backpacks.
yeah, that was bad business. So I also usually do take Dramamine before I fly, but I hadn't taken any for some reason. I don't know if I didn't bring any or what the deal was. So I hadn't taken any either. So that I usually do that as well. But that was probably like the big notable one I had. We've had actually really good luck, I think, for the most part, whenever we've traveled for these events. The hotels have been, maybe not amazing in some of the places, but good enough. Not that I've nothing worth complaining about. And the food's generally been pretty good every place we've gone to. It helps that we've gone to like Vegas, which has great food, and Kansas City that has great food, places like that. So
Mhm.
we've had pretty good luck, I think. How about you, Max?
Yeah, I think the only thing I could really come up with was this past year for Vegas, we missed our original flight
Oh
out
yeah.
of Minneapolis
Oh yeah. Yeah.
by 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Literally 10 minutes. We did not expect it to be the same weekend as everybody gets to fly back to college. So we went to the airport thinking we'll get through security really quick on a Sunday morning, and we didn't. I think Dana's bag got flagged and they had to open every one of your deck boxes, and I think you brought like 10 decks.
Yeah.
So, like, and I'm not blaming you. I'm just saying, we got the short straw that day and we literally got to the gate and they're like, oh, your flight left like 5 minutes ago.
Well, like the year before, we would have gone on the previous Sundays because Vegas was like a weekend later in 2019 than it was in 2018. And that Sunday when we flew out, I mean, the airport was just quiet Sunday morning. And, I don't think we even had to wait in a line to go through security. You just walked up, put your stuff in the conveyor and walked through.
I think in 2018, that was when it was still in June. So that would have been months prior because last
Okay.
year we went in August. Our first Vegas
Oh,
experience.
sure. Yep. Nope. You're right.
We went in June. So yeah, it was dead in the airport on a Sunday morning when we flew out.
So, we weren't, yeah, you're right. It wasn't June. So we weren't thinking, we're like, okay, well, it'll be the same as it was the last time we went to Vegas on a Sunday, but it was the end of August this time and all the kids were going back to school. And yeah, so we went from like just walking up to the security gate Sunday morning and just going through to waiting in line for, an hour or something just to even get through security.
Yeah.
So that was a bad one. Luckily, that could have been way, way worse. Luckily, like we got on a flight, an hour and a half later or something, and it didn't shake up things too badly. But yeah, that could have been a problem.
No, yeah, it wasn't bad. The people at Delta were great. They were able to get us on
Yeah.
the next flight out. And in Minneapolis, there's 8 flights to Vegas a day.
Right.
So it was like, cool, we can get you on the next one. So I had enough time to have a breakfast beer and
That's right, you did.
sleep the entire way to Vegas.
Yeah, that's right.
CDM also asks, have you ever lost a portion of your collection, whether that's stolen or, basement flooded or something like that? I can personally say I have not. I've only been playing Magic since about the original Innistrad block. So, I'm still pretty new to the game. And at that time I was living on my own and, I keep all my stuff and, it's moved to the other apartment I've lived in since I've started playing. So I haven't had any bad experiences in this fact that I lost anything or something was stolen out of my collection.
I, however, can't say that. So I started playing when I was in high school. I had a friend that had gone on that was like a year or two older than me, and he went to college. And his freshman year, he came back the following summer. And so I was probably, I think I might have been a junior or senior, I forget. But he came back with Magic cards that he had started playing at college, which I think would have been unlimited. I think Revise was just coming out. So we're talking like, early 90s, mid 90s. So that summer that he got me into the game was the summer Legends was released. So we bought Legends packs, and I was still able to occasionally find, like I bought a few Arabian Nights and Antiquities packs in a few card shops in Wisconsin, but it was mostly revised. and legends that I was able to pick up when I first started playing. So I had a pretty good collection of, revised duels, things along those lines. And then because I got really into the game, I was kind of playing what would have passed for competitively back then, which wasn't like a tournament, but like you're playing a strong deck locally in some kind of a tournament. And so I had then gone and picked up the moxes I needed for a deck. And I didn't have a Black Lotus, but I had Juzam Jinns, which in Arabian Nights were like a really good, probably the best black creature in the game at the time. I think it was a 4-mana 5/5. So I had like those kind of things for a deck. Library of Alexandria, I had Abzar Baghdad. Cards that at the time were, like $40 each or something. And today would pay for a good chunk of a college education. And when I was then in college a few years later, I wasn't really playing anymore, but I had my cards. And a roommate of mine basically had a nervous breakdown, and he stole and sold a bunch of stuff that myself and the other two roommates had. So he pawned all my Magic cards to a pawn shop in town, along with like a CD collection, like my baseball glove and whatever. And it wasn't even for drugs. He just sold a bunch of stuff. It was super weird. And the other roommate, he actually, when you get those like junk credit card applications in the mail, he filled a bunch of those out for our third roommate. And then when their credit cards came in, he maxed them all out, buying goofy stuff like multiple fish tanks and multiple clock radio, like the weirdest, most random things. And then he would give those to us. He'd be like, oh, I bought a second fish tank. Does someone want my first fish tank? Like, I guess. And he's like, I bought a third fish tank. Does anyone want my second one? I bought a bigger one. And he's doing this on our other roommates' credit cards, basically. So anyway, grand scheme of things, I lost all my cards. The other roommate had to declare bankruptcy because he was like 20 grand in credit card debt.
Oof. And
the first guy got arrested, and it was a whole thing. But I didn't get my cards back. And then my cards were, they were pawned, and then the pawn shop, I don't know what they did with them. They weren't very forthcoming with information, probably because they knew what the value was. At the time, they were probably, those moxes were probably a couple $100-ish versus today where they're a couple $1,000-ish.
Right.
So I quit then. I'm like, well, I can't rebuild that collection. And I wasn't playing much anyway, so I'm just done. I stopped and then didn't come back in until like Innistrad Return to Ravnica when I got sucked back into the game. So yeah, I had my entire collection essentially stolen back in, 1996 or something.
Oof. That sucks.
That was rough. Yeah. So there you go. There's my what has been lost from my collection. That's it. The depressed Vorthos asked us, and he's probably depressed from that story, is there an unlegendary creature you would want to build around, meaning like unstable, unglued, etc.? I'm not a big unset player. I don't know why. I don't like the idea that it's so temporary. Like if anything you build, you are basically limited to play in an unset, and it's just too narrow for me to put the time into, kind of. If I did, I think Grimlock Dinobot Leader is pretty sweet. So if I did build something, it would be that, because I think the way the card is worded too, you wouldn't have to build a super specifically undeck around it. You could build your deck, and aside from the commander, you could use mostly commander cards. So it would be likely the kind of thing people would let you play without it being causing too many problems in an actual game. And I think the card Crowstorm is legitimately like a super cool card that's in one of the most recent unsets. It's basically makes a Stormcrow, and it has Storm itself. So it's like a meme card, but it's also a genuinely playable, solid card. And if I was playing Bird Tribal, I would totally try to sneak in Crowstorm.
Very nice.
How about you, Max?
So when Unhinged, yep, that sounds right. Or
I think so.
Unsanctioned, is that the wrench? Yeah,
Unsanctioned's a wrenched one, I believe.
Yep. Okay, so when Unsanctioned came out, I was super intrigued by X, the legendary creature, human spy. He's a 2/2 for Damir. And he says, as long as X is in an X's owner's opponent's hand, X's owner may cast X and activate X's abilities. That opponent can't cast X and plays with his or her hand revealed. And then X's abilities are Damir and tap to put it into an opponent's hand, or 3 and Damir, and you may play a card in the same hand as X without paying its mana cost.
Okay.
I think that's just a cool way to kind of play your opponent's decks,
Sure.
Bribery, acquire cards like that, or even like the red cards that play with your opponent's top of their library. This is just a really cool take on that, and there has yet to be a Damir commander that really speaks to me. Okay. So I think this would be fun. It makes you kind of use their resources for you.
Sure, that makes sense.
The Depressed Vorthos also asked, if you could take one card off the Commander banned list, what would it be and why? I'm going to kind of go off of your notes already in here, Dana, because you wrote about a card I was going to talk about, and that's Yawgmoth's Bargain.
Oh, yeah.
So that's 4 black for an enchantment. You skip your draw step, and then you can pay a life to draw a card. I get why this is broken. I really do. Because unlike Necropotence, where, you have to exile the cards and you get them at your end step, you just get them right away.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also double the mana cost than Necropotence, so there are definitely decks that would probably abuse this really badly. Nekuzar, maybe like a weird 3+ color Locust God type deck.
Sure.
I also don't think your opponents are going to let this stick around very long.
I mean, it is 6 mana and it has to hit the field, and you do have to have life in your hand, and then you do probably have to have mana left in your hand, mana left on the field to do anything with all those cards you're going to draw down to. I mean, it's disgustingly good, but like, is it any better than, Ad Nauseam? I don't, or is it any more difficult, or is it any easier to set up a, instant win combo with than it is with Bowls of Citadel? I don't know if it is.
Yeah, I think it is a little better than Ad Nauseam, because Ad Nauseam, you need to at least, in EDH, in my opinion, build your deck around it.
Yes.
Where this is just straight up drawing you cards for 1 life.
But I also feel like Ad Nauseam, the average casual player isn't going to run Ad Nauseam as like a fun card for the most part, whereas I could see somebody being like, oh, I'm just going to run this as a, bad Phyrexian Arena in my janky deck and pay a few life every turn and draw a few cards. Because you can, like, if you're playing casually, you probably can't afford to get domed for 6 when you reveal that, giant beater creature from Ad Nauseam, but like Yawgmoth's Bargain, you can pay 6 life and draw 6 cards. I don't know. I'm not saying it should be unbanned. Like, I get it, but I also can see a situation where I don't know if it's worse than some things that are banned, maybe. Because like CEDH isn't going to play that. They're not going to pay 6 mana for an enchantment that just puts cards into your hand. I don't think that they aren't going to have mana to do anything with it afterwards. Maybe I'm wrong, but like that doesn't seem like it's going to be broken on the competitive end. So who knows? But that's the first one that jumped out at me. I kind of am with you there. The other one I at least would mention, it's always kind of bugged me that Library of Alexandria is banned and Bazaar of Baghdad is not. Especially because I think Bazaar is probably a better card most of the time. Having to have 7 cards in hand to use Library that's like a pretty big ask, I think. And it's maybe one of those situations where the more powerful your deck gets, the less likely you are to have 7 cards in hand. Whereas Bazaar, letting you put stuff in the graveyard, there's a ton of decks where that's just gas. And the fact that Library is banned and Bazaar isn't is just weird. I don't know if it should be unbanned. I don't know if that means Bazaar should be banned. Or maybe it doesn't matter because they're both so pricey and no one's running them. I don't know. But it's like one of those things that's kind of like running Swords to Plowshares and not running Path to Exile. Run them both or run neither. In this case, it's like ban them both or don't ban either of them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
John Amoeba asks, what is an expensive/reserved list card you'd like to see as a functional or balanced reprint? This one's tricky because we've had a lot of reserve list cards that have had kind of semi-functional or balanced reprints. If there was a card that I would say would be generally good for the game to just magically not be on the reserve list, is I think there's a lot of white decks that would appreciate having access to Tithe. It's just a 1 mana way to go get a plains, or if you're behind on lands, which in white you usually are, you can get 2 for 1 mana at instant speed. It's a really, really useful card in mono white or Boros, and it's unfortunately closing on $15 now. It's really scarce because it's from way back in, I want to say Alliances, but that might be wrong. Mirage, actually, I think. So it's from way back in Magic's early days. It's just tough to get, and I think that would be a really useful card for almost any white or Boros deck to have access to, and they just can't reprint it because it's on the reserve list. But that's the one that jumps out at me. How about you, Max?
Mine's kind of a loose answer. I would like to see a Gauntlet series. So Gauntlet of Might is the card on the reserve list. Whenever a mountain is tapped, it adds double. Red creatures get +1/+1. It got something close with Gauntlet of Power, where you choose the color. It impacts everybody. But I would really like to see a cycle of these. 1 for islands, 1 for forests, 1 for mountains, 1 for plains.
I like that.
Just to maybe make it a little more exclusive, because there's a mana symbol on that card, so it can't go into every deck,
Yeah, I like
unlike
that.
Gauntlet Power or something like that can.
They have been doing a pretty good job with this lately. Things like growing right to Itlimoc turning into the Cradle of Itlimoc, which is, essentially the guy's cradle once flipped. They have been really doing some experimentation with this lately, and I would assume they're going to keep doing that pushing forward. So, maybe we will get a variant of Tithe at some point or something of those gauntlets. Yeah, I actually had never ever thought of that gauntlet being a cycle. That would totally make sense, and that would be, I think, those would be strong cards, but I don't think they would be broken.
I think they'd definitely be something you see in like a new card in an Eternal Masters
Yeah,
type product, or maybe just a card we see in a Commander Precon
sure.
only.
Yeah, no, I like that one for sure.
John also asks, do you subscribe to any conspiracy theories about the Wanderer's identity?
Getting into some Vorthos territory here. So what are your thoughts on this one, Max? Anything jumps out at you?
I mean, I don't subscribe to any theories. I didn't really follow the War of the Spark story very closely like I had with the other Gatewatch stories. I mean, I'm perfectly fine with it being Emrakul and her just trying to be like, I'm going to help
Hey
you guys
guys.
because the enemy of my enemy is my friend right now. And then, bait and switch, she murders the entire Gatewatch because she's been their friend. I'm okay with that.
So I am not a by any means super well versed Vorthos type of person when it comes to the storyline lore, but I have a passing knowledge to a degree of some of it. I've read enough wikis at the very least, if not the actual books, and I've listened to some pretty good Vorthos casts over the years, namely the Vorthos cast that goes into a lot of this stuff. So I did pay attention to the Wanderer. First thing I will say though is like as a actual literary trope, the mysterious or unknown stranger is a pretty classic one, and WotC is very much likely to oftentimes revisit kind of classic literary tropes. So I don't know if the Wanderer even has to be anybody so much as it is just we're going to hit this one story beat that's kind of recognizable, which is the Wanderer from nowhere with a mysterious past who you don't know about. I think that it doesn't have to be anything more than that, and I think that would make sense for them to do that kind of thing. They've also in the past been willing to create kind of blank slate characters. Ugin is mentioned as being, that the someone who uses colorless magic, and it wasn't until, I don't think Zendikar that he was first mentioned as a spirit dragon. So we didn't know he wasn't even a mage. We didn't know he was a dragon until he's referenced in the first Zendikar block, if I remember correctly at least. So like they're willing to create a character that's kind of a blank slate, and then years later fill in information that maybe they didn't have. Like I would guarantee Ugin wasn't intended to be Bolus's twin. And maybe not even intended to be a dragon at first. They just like needed a name to use for that. So they did it and later on added stuff that mattered. It wouldn't surprise me at all if that's just what the Wanderer is. It's just a blank slate that they might fill in later and might not. That would be my guess. However, if you forced me to pick a character from lore, way back in the Kamigawa block, Machiko Konda, who was the daughter of the main bad guy, the white character whose name, General Konda, I forget his first name, in the actual block, at one point lore-wise, she merges with Akami, I believe, who is Coyote, I don't know how to pronounce it. And they essentially became like one character that were merged together called the Sisters of Flesh and Spirit. And then I don't remember if anything really even happened beyond that with those two merging together. That would make sense. The dress of the Wanderer does kind of look Kamigawa-esque. So if I had to pick something, that would make as much sense as anything. Michiko Kondo was a white character. There's a lot of white commies. That would make sense as much as anything does. So if I had to guess, that would be it. Mark asks us, what is the worst card you still enjoy playing? And for example, his is Preacher, because sideburns rule. Or maybe Giant Oyster, the slowest removal in the game, but he still clammed your dude to death.
I get it. It's an oyster fun.
Triangle of War in my Glissa deck is pretty good. It basically is an artifact that forces a fight, but because it's Glissa, I can then recur it after I sacrifice it. But I think that might actually be because it's actually good in that deck, or it's pretty good anyway. From the same deck a few weeks ago, I actually have been running Serrated Arrows in the deck, which is an old artifact from Homelands, and I don't think it's good enough for the deck. But it's been funny every time I've played it, and everyone goes, is that really Serrated Arrows? And I've had a couple times when it's actually caused problems where someone's commander is like a 1/1 and they can't play it because I've got that Serrated Arrow sitting there. So like it's actually affected game states just by being annoying.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. It isn't good enough, but it's been funny whenever I've played it. So that's the one that jumps out at me. How about you, Max?
So I have two. I really like the card Draining Welk, but I,
Yeah,
for some reason, can never make it work in any decks
sure.
I run, whether it's a +1/+1 counter deck or a mono blue deck. Holding 6 mana up for a counter spell on a creature that's probably
Yeah.
just going to get passed because it's going to get 8 +1/+1 counters on it doesn't feel good.
Yep.
And my other one is just an old pet card of mine is Compost. It's a green enchantment that says whenever a black card enters an opponent's graveyard, draw a card.
Yeah.
So it's extremely meta dependent,
Right.
but it did work for me a lot when I did run it, and I try to always slot it into a deck every now and then. I actually had it in my Vegas Rotisserie draft deck last year, but that deck pooped all over me, so I never got to see it.
You didn't even get the chance to draw it.
Nope.
Yeah, Compost is a cool card too. There's actually a few of those old ones that are like that care about colors in weird ways. I just wrote this week on EDH Rec about Insight, which is a blue enchantment that draws you a card whenever an opponent casts a green spell. So there's a few of those old ones that are super fun, and oftentimes it's tough to justify a slot for them because there's just going to be games where they're dead. But the games they work, they do a lot of work, and then you get to run an old goofy card too. That's always fun.
You mean I would be able to draw as many cards as you draw in Reki if I played that?
Yeah, actually, technically, yes. Yeah. So you're telling me you're going to put it in your blue deck now?
No. I mean, what's its CMC, I guess? Let me look at that.
I think it's 3. I think it's 2 and 1.
Oh.
2 and 1 for an enchantment. Whenever an opponent casts a green spell, you draw a card.
If it was...
It's not a May effect, though.
Right. If it was 2 mana, I would try it. I would try it in Tuvasa if it
Sure.
was 2 mana.
Just run Rhystic Study. Otherwise,
Okay,
if you want a 3-mana
exactly.
enchantment, run Rhystic Study. Although that's cards closer down to $20 nowadays.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe you'll be a budget Rhystic Study replacement. How's that?
Maybe. Mark also asked, is there a strategy or line of play that you always wanted to build a deck around but just couldn't seem to make it work? Mine is a deck that Dana actually has together, and that would be Exalted. It's one of the first mechanics I kind of in the
Nice.
core sets, but I would love to be able to do it not in 5 colors.
Yes. Yeah.
I would love it if there were just a few more cards in maybe 1 or 2 other 2 colors to keep it in the 2 color realm.
Sure.
But making it 5 colors, I get you have to do it because there just aren't enough cards. I just wish we didn't have to.
Yes. I'm with you. And I tried Saskia once upon a time, and Saskia doesn't have blue, which doesn't seem like it's a big deal, but you lose Rafik and you lose Finest Hour and you lose there's like a couple of like cool exalted cards that you just lose out on, even if there isn't anything in blue by itself that's really good. And that's just kind of frustrating because like, man, I'm playing exalted. I want to run Finest Hour. I want to run Rafik. So yeah, no, I get that totally. One I've tried a few different times and I can't ever quite make it work is extra combat steps, particularly ones that care about on attack triggers. And to a degree, Exalted is kind of the same. Exalted was one I tried to make work with that because Exalted triggers every combat step. So kind of like the thought was if you got multiple combat triggers, your Exalted creature gets bigger and bigger every swing. But I just thought like things that trigger, when this creature attacks, it gets, +2/+0, or when it attacks, tap target creature or whatever. Extra combat steps, stacking those would be useful. I could just never find the balance. Plus it also kind of feels like extra turns to a degree, and that's annoying. So I could just never find the balance of ways to make it work in an interesting way, aside from like Najeela. I mean, obviously there's extra combat steps like Najeela that just win games, or Narset or something. But I just couldn't figure out how to make it work in a way that A, wasn't annoying, and B, was unique. Up next, Dr. Mike asks us, is there a time when you've intentionally made a suboptimal play, and what happened as a result of that? Obviously as a mistake all the time. Against new players, for sure, when like I see an opening and I'm like, oh, they'd have no idea that I can just kill them right now. But like it's somebody who's new or new-ish enough that like I don't want to kill them right now. I'll let them play the game a little bit longer. So I've for sure done that. Even in games, and maybe I wouldn't do this against you, Max, or like somebody I knew that was a good experienced player. But I've had those games where you kill somebody in a game and you play another one, and like turn 4, you wind up drawing the same card that you had last game that wound up being really strong. And you're like, oh, I don't want to put this down again right now and have it be as good as it was the last game against this person, so I'm just going to not play it. I've like held off on that. I can't even think of the card, but I've for sure done that where in back-to-back games, I've seen the same card that I know is going to do the same thing as it did last game, and I just don't play it because I don't want to repeat beating them the same way or something 2 games in a row. So I've done that for sure. Or even like a feel bad situation when you draw the card and you're like, oh, I can just right now kill one person, on turn 5, and then have nobody else I can kill for 6 turns. Like, but I know I can kill one person right now, and you're like, but do I want to have that person sit out? Maybe not, so you don't do it. I guess the argument could be that strategically speaking, you're going to put a bullseye on your head killing one person, and if you can't do anything else for 6 turns, maybe it's a better idea to not do that. I don't know. So maybe that is the optimal play, is not do it, but I've definitely made that choice where I've been like, I could kill one person, and then they're going to sit and watch for 20 minutes, so I'm just going to not do that.
Gotcha.
How about you, Max?
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely agree with all the stuff about playing against a new player or a newish player. Mine tend to come from people who are experienced, but their decks are just not performing like they should.
Mm-hmm.
And I always feel bad about taking that player out because, you know what? Maybe they only get to play one night a month and this is their night and they
Sure.
just aren't having luck. The heart of the cards isn't with them. So I always feel bad about, like you said, you could kill that player, but like, are they going to want to stick around? So like, I usually tend to not make that play and maybe swing into someone with a better board state or just pass the turn just because I want to see them play the game that they only get to play so often.
Sure.
Dr. Mike also asked, who is your favorite planeswalker? Mine would have to be Elspeth.
Okay.
Really any of them, but I guess Elspeth Sun's Champion is the first true Elspeth I really played with.
Sure.
With it being in Standard around that time, and that's right when I was making the transition from Standard kitchen table play / an occasional F&M to just pure Commander EDH. And recognizing the power of that card in EDH was like kind of eye-opening to me, like, oh, this is really, really good. It's something, like we always say, it protects itself, it blows everything up, and when you're playing multiplayer Magic, that's just better than one-on-one.
Yeah, I agree. Garruk was probably the first Planeswalker I liked, but we're talking like back when, we both sort of kind of I came back to the game when you started playing Innistrad, Return to Ravnica-ish. At that point in time, there's only like 11 Planeswalkers. There's like the Lorwyn 5 and Elspeth and, Venser and whatever. So there's not very many to choose from. So if one of your favorites is going to become one of the first ones you saw, it was a pretty narrow group you could choose from. But I did like Garruk early on. I liked the fact that he wasn't really a good guy or a bad guy. It wasn't even like he was neutral. He just had his own agenda and did not care about anybody else's like story. I thought that was really neat. And I liked that he also then, even after he became cursed, he wasn't entirely a bad guy, although he was, I guess, hunting and killing other planeswalkers. He just wanted to get left alone. Even after Jace stopped him from turning into a demon, he basically like wasn't even thankful. He was just like, stay away from me or I will kill you. I appreciated that kind of weird characterization from Garruk. In the same vein, there was a story, I think it was Project Lightning Bug was one of the stories, and that was the first, I think, story I read with Ral Zarek in it. And it's basically Ral and Jace having a conversation. There's some other stuff with Niv Mizzet, but Ral is quite self-aware in the story that was really interesting. Like, he realized he's kind of but he knew it and was aware of it and was maybe kind of trying to not be so much of a all the time. Unlike Jace, who's a and doesn't know it, seemingly. So I liked that characterization of Ral Zarek as well. So those are the ones that jump out at me. We also had one more follow-up question here from Dr. Mike. Do you think there's a significant power creep going on? We're going to skip that question because we both kind of were like, that's probably a show topic we could talk about. And I think we've addressed it in the past years ago. But I think given how many strong sets we've had recently, we'll just do a show on that in the next couple weeks. So that's one we're going to skip in terms of answering it here. And next we'll jump to Cable's question. What's the craziest, most interesting play, whether it won the game or not, that you've seen that really sticks in your mind? So one that really jumped out at me that I remember from years ago when I first built my Sphinx Tribal deck, a player cast Time Stretch, which is I think it's 10 mana, take 2 extra turns.
Yes.
And then went to, end the turn to take his 2 extra turns. Through no planning of my own, I just happened to have a Leyline Anticipation in play, and I was just using it to, flash in creatures at the end of turn to minimize them getting killed by Wrath of God or whatever. And I had a Chancellor of the Spires was the creature I was going to bring into play, and that lets you cast an instant or sorcery spell from an opponent's graveyard without paying the mana cost when it ETBs. And again, my plan was just end of turn, I'll flash in this Chancellor of the Spires and cast someone's, Swords of Plowshares or someone's draw spell or whatever. Well, hey, there's a Time Stretch in the graveyard that just got cast, so I flashed in Chancellor, which cast that time stretch, giving me 2 extra turns, and I get to take them before the original caster does. So it comes back to me, and I top decked Stolen Identity,
Oh no.
which lets you imprint onto a creature, making a copy of that creature. Well, with Transfer the Spires out, I could cast Stolen Identity on the Transfer the Spires, swing, make a copy of Transfer the Spires to cast the time stretch out of his graveyard, because it doesn't exile the spell, it just stays there. It goes back after I cast it. Take an extra turn, in which case I could attack with Transfer the Spires and cast the time stretch. So I had infinite turns because of someone else's time stretch. So that felt really good to the person who thought he was going to combo out or do something with that time stretch, I'm sure, and it just gave me infinite turns because of blind dumb luck.
Gross.
So that's one that jumped out at me. And I know one you're going to tell here right now, Max.
I am. This is from our game this past weekend. We were playing with Dr. Mike and Dan Kraus and yourself. I was playing my Tuvasa deck, and for whatever reason, Tuvasa wasn't on the battlefield, but I had a Citizen Champion out. And I had been stocking my graveyard through, like, discarding, because I think I was missing blue mana, to be honest. I was stocking my graveyard full, and by the time this play happened, Citizen Champion already had maybe 6 +1/+1 counters on it. I ended up casting a Replenish, bringing in close to 20 enchantments back to the battlefield. And Citizen Champion says whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on it and draw a card. Well, among those 20 enchantments was also a Nylea's Colossus. So Citizen Champion got 20 +1/+1 counters on him and then doubled 20 times.
Oof.
And we did the math and it was like 3.6 million damage.
Oh yeah, it was insane.
And I had a couple auras that made it unblockable and trample and lifelink, and I kind of just I think I took you out, Dana, because you were the highest life total.
You killed me first.
And then it was left to Dr. Mike and he goes, yeah, I can't do 3.6 million damage. And I'm like, oh, that's before the double strike. He goes, okay, I can't do 8 million damage to you in a turn, so good game.
Yeah, that was gross. It was funny though, like everyone was laughing. That was pretty crazy.
It was a lot of fun. Something I'll probably never do again. So Matthew Hopkins asked us, who is our most underrated commander? Mine would be Rexiel of the Risen Deep. This was originally from Worldwake. It's a legendary Kraken, 5/8 for 3, blue, and a black. It has Island Walk and Swamp Walk. And whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may cast target instant or sorcery card from that player's graveyard without paying its mana cost. And if it would be put into the graveyard this turn, exile it instead. This is one of the few Damir commanders I've always wanted to try to build, but there's so much stuff involved with making sure your opponents have a graveyard and are casting instants and sorceries. Like, I don't know if dropping a 6 mana commander to cast someone's Kodama's Reach is going to be worth it. Maybe the first time, but, you're pretty much telling your opponents, don't cast your fun spells like that time stretch or, that Chandra's Ignition or whatever you want to cast with it.
I can see that one. That's a neat old commander for sure.
Yeah. What about you, Dana?
I've always thought Mazarek Crawl Death Priest was super cool. That was in the pre-con with Marin, which is probably why I think it doesn't see any play, because Marin mostly does what it does and probably does it better. But Mazarek is 5 mana, and it's Golgari, obviously, does a flying, and whenever a player sacrifices another permanent, put a +1 counter on each creature you control. And it's any player, and it's any permanent, so like lands count, and, if you're running a bunch of those 0/1 Eldrazi Scions or the 1/1 Eldrazi things that you can just sacrifice at will for mana, or any fetch land. It's like a fair Korvold almost. And it puts a counter on each creature you control too, so you can go wide. You're not just stuck trying to do Voltron stuff. But if you want to do Voltron stuff, Mazarek does have flying, and that does interact nicely with things like Hardened Scales and Doubling Season. I think it's like a legitimately super cool commander that probably is pretty strong, and everyone just builds Marin instead.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it is a really cool card, and I think you're 100% correct. It just gets overshadowed by Marin.
Yeah.
Full stop.
Yep. So that's one I like a lot, and I just never ever see. So that's one that primarily does jump out at me. Matthew asks, what's your favorite set/block in Magic's history? Man, I don't know. That's tough. I kind of answered this later on, but so I'll give 2 different answers here. For ones I actually played in, I have a soft spot for Ravnica as a plain, and I always like the cards in Ravnica. I think part of that is because I tend to play 2-color decks, and there's always a bunch of new toys in Ravnica as well. So it just does all the stuff I like. It's always a fun limited environment. It's almost always an interesting standard because 2-color just lends itself to that. It always gives me a bunch of cards from my decks. I like the world. It hits every single kind of beat I want. So I tend to lean into saying Return to Ravnica is probably my favorite, but I liked the last Ravnica set as well between War of the Spark and Guilds and Allegiance a lot. So those ones definitely jump out at me. Way back in the day, I already mentioned playing back in the day. Legends was crazy just because at the time I remember being like, legendary creatures, what? And even though most of them are terrible, and it was a giant set too. You know, we had never seen anything that had 390 cards or whatever dumb amount it had in it. So it was ginormous too. And I felt like every pack you opened, you got cards you had never ever seen before. Particularly because back then you didn't have lists out there or spoiler season. You just opened packs and found cards. So you're like, it was like every pack I opened had like new cards I had never ever seen. That was super fun at the time, at least. How about you, Max?
So I think my favorite blocks are always the Ravnica ones. It's kind of where I started playing more competitive, and I put that in air quotes with like going to FNMs and going to do drafts. And I mean, I am a 2-color mage. That's who I am. I like my 2-color decks. So it kind of speaks to me that way, just personal reasons. And that's when I really started playing Magic a lot. But overall, I really like core sets.
Okay.
I think core sets give the commander players fun tools, as in like this core set's really enchantment based, or this core set's really instant and sorcery based with a lot of prowess type mechanics in it. And you always get somewhat cool legendaries or just cool stompy creatures that just kind of appeal to the overall commander player. Like, cool, I want to hit someone with a 9/9 for 5 mana and you don't get that unless it's a core set.
Yeah, I was, especially they have figured out how to do core sets well the last few years. So that's made those a lot more fun to play in as well. So that's been nice to see.
Henry asks, Henry, thank you for the Sea of Clouds trade. I appreciate that. Henry asked, how do you recognize magic burnout and what's your advice on dealing with it? So our listeners know this past year, I suffered from a big bout of magic burnout between the show and traveling 3 weekends a month for Magic Fest, whether it's local or in Kansas City or Vegas.
Sure.
All the prep we did to make sure we had a show every day we were at Vegas.
Yeah.
Which was a lot of fun, and we'll do it again next year, because it's Vegas week. What else do we do?
But it was exhausting.
It was exhausting, and when we got back from Vegas, the last thing I wanted to do was shuffle my deck or go to the LGS and sit down with my friends and play the game. I was lucky enough that my second favorite game in the world, Borderlands, the third one, was coming out in September. So I only had about a month of filling the time, I guess is how I'll say it, of not playing Magic.
Right.
So I guess my biggest advice to how to deal with it is you have to recognize it immediately, because I think if I wouldn't have, I would have turned into that player nobody wants to play with at the shop, because I would turn into a like I'd be angry all the time. I'd be snippy, make rude comments, and that's not who I am or who I want to be. And the best way to deal with it is have a backup hobby. And I know that's hard for some people to do. Like some people, Magic is all they have because of other life commitments, work, family, stuff like that. But, I'm single. I play video games if I'm not playing Magic, or hockey season started. So like I had a few other things to kind of focus my energy into besides Magic. And I think that's the biggest thing, is have something else that you love to do. Maybe you don't love it as much as Magic, but have something else that you can maybe focus your energy into for a short period of time or a long period of time. I mean, I don't think I started playing Magic at a heavy rate until end of October.
Yeah, you were gone for a month to 6 weeks for the most part.
And then that's when the regular season of hockey started, so I was gone every other week because of games being on EDH night. But, now there is no sports, sad face, but I mean, I'm really enjoying playing every week over webcam with you guys, and hopefully when we can start playing in person, we'll be playing a lot.
Yeah. For me, this hit me in probably January. I got through the end of the year and finished, 2019. I think I had 352 games I played. I was logging my games. I hit the end of the year and closed that book. And like, okay, 352 last year. And I didn't feel like playing then. I was just tired. Like for some reason, the act of finishing the year and then rolling into January, and it's January too, it's 18 hours of darkness, whatever it winds up feeling like here in Wisconsin. It's cold and miserable. And I just was like, I had a run there from probably most of the month of January where I just didn't feel like playing. And it was probably in part life in general, because that time of year is always kind of blah, and you're coming off, you're crashing off the holidays and all that kind of thing. So that was part of it as well, but I was just tired. I was just tired of the game. I just didn't feel like going to play on Tuesday, and that was unusual for me. I almost always would be hyped to go play, and I was just not feeling it for some reason. And kind of, it wasn't even intentional. Like, I think you were much more intentional when you were feeling a little bit of burnout about stepping back and doing other things. I don't think I was intentionally not doing it, but I just found myself like, when the time came to, have some downtime and do something magic related, I just wouldn't. I would be like, I'm just going to do something else, because I just didn't feel like it. And I think, again, unintentionally, but the act of stepping away from the game is kind of what helped.
Yeah, I remember that time this past winter, because there'd be weeks where it's like, hey, I'm not playing tonight because the Ducks play at 7, and I
Right.
really don't want to go to the shop and barely get a game in and have to rush out. And I'll be sitting at home or at the bar watching the game, and I get a message from you saying, oh yeah, I left already. It's 7:45.
Yeah.
So I mean, I get it. It happens to everybody, and the fact that people just need to recognize it, I think, is the biggest thing. Is what I can really communicate is, if you recognize it's happening, it's way better than just kind of pushing it into your mind
Yeah.
and just ignoring it.
Well, and also the game is a lot more relentless than it once was. There's so many expansions coming out, and there's just so much stuff constantly happening. And there's so much stuff on the internet. Like, if you want to listen to podcasts, 2 times a day, every single day, there's enough content out there for that. And if you want to read, 20 articles between EDH Rec and Hipsters of the Coast and the, MTG Nexus and whatever, like, there's content out there to read. And, there's Discords and Slacks to participate in. And like, if you want to immerse yourself in, Magic content or even just Commander content 24/7, it's there and you can. And it's easy to feel like you need to stay caught up, and you can't, and you have to tell yourself, like, I'm just not feeling it this week, and I'm just not going to pay attention, and that's perfectly cool. And if you do that for a month or 2 months, or like I did that with mystery boosters. Not that I didn't find them interesting, but I'm like, I don't need to pay attention to what's being reprinted or what's not being reprinted. I just can't. It was at the point in time when I just didn't want to deal with tracking that. And I'm sure I lost some money on some cards in my collection that normally I would have maybe tried to get rid of ahead of time before the value dropped. I just didn't mentally, like, it was just too much, so I just didn't pay attention to it. And I think we've mentioned that about some of the secret layers. If you don't want to buy them, don't buy them. You have to, like, be willing to clock out.
Yeah, for sure.
What are your thoughts, this is also from Henry, on the pandemic's short and the long-term effects on paper EDH? Man, I don't even know. I mean, listen, I'm a layman. I know as much about this as anybody out there. I have a tough time imagining people are going to be able to congregate in game shops, or especially at a Magic Fest or a GP, until there's a vaccine. Maybe I'm wrong. So, if you are a virologist out there and you're listening to this and you think I'm an idiot, then feel free to tell me I am. I'm not foreseeing how that can work, just because it seems so dangerous to congregate in a group of 1,000 people in a building, or even 30 people packed together in an LGS. But so that's definitely a thing. How it's going to affect the game as a whole, though, I have a feeling that once they do have some kind of a vaccine, presumably, or some kind of a treatment that makes it safe to redo that, I feel like everyone's just going to want to get back out there and play. I don't think this kind of thing is going to kill Magic at all. I think in the last 2 weeks, since people have gotten some money from the government, people have been buying cards, so prices are going up, and there's a gazillion webcam games. So, like, when given a choice between playing on a low-quality webcam and not playing, people are playing on webcams. I don't think this is making people move on to other hobbies. It doesn't seem like it. I think that this is just going to be an annoying lull in terms of, how it affects your game. Obviously, it's more than annoying if it affects your life, but it's just a lull in terms of how people play Paper Commander. And I would guess once we can get back to playing, people are going to be back to playing in full force. That's my guess. What do you think, Max?
So the short term, I think you hit on the head. Like, people are buying cards. It's obvious.
Yeah.
We got the government money, or the people who were able to got it. I mean, I just placed an order. The downside of that, though, is most big card sellers, so your Card Kingdoms, your SCGs, your Cool Stuff Incs., your TCG Direct, their warehouse staff is cut to bare bones
Yep.
just for safety precautions. So I think the impact there is like, I just placed an order with Card Kingdom on Monday morning.
Okay.
I'm not expecting an email saying it's shipped for 2 weeks. Like,
Yeah.
that's the warning on the website, is expect 1 to 2 weeks for shipment, which, you know what, I'm fine with. You know, it
Sure.
happens.
Well, I wound up placing an order for a deck, for some cards for a new deck, and rather than buy on, like, the first thing I did was I just contacted DJ Johnson from Brainstorm Brewery and said, here's the list of cards I'm looking for. What do you have, DJ? And he had like, 25 of the 35 cards I wanted or something. But like, then I know there's no warehouse wait, and I'm supporting
Right.
someone who's a community member too. It just kind of happened to work out. So I've been taking those workarounds, and I wonder if, like, long term, I wonder if I'm going to find myself still doing that once we open back up. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was going to say. I should have gone that route.
Sure.
I wasn't thinking it was early in the morning. I was antsy and just pulled the trigger. I think if I would have thought it out a little longer, I would have been like, I don't need to do this. Long term, I don't know. Like, I'm concerned about how many LGS stores are going to be around when this is all over.
Sure. Yeah, it's definitely going to hurt.
I mean, every state's stay-at-home order is different.
Right.
Some are still extending theirs through July. Some are opening up, whatever. I mean, it still falls onto the individuals to say, do you feel safe leaving your house and going into the masses?
Right.
And that's on every individual. But for all I know, when this ends, we might not have an LGS in Eau Claire to play at.
Right.
Or we might
Right.
have a different LGS to play at. And I hope that's not the case. I really do. But I mean, I can't predict the long-term future. But if I had to put my guess on it, I actually see the long-term future being more like going back to, hey, let's go meet at this person's house from,
maybe.
1 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon till midnight, and we'll just jam games all day.
Because we're kind of doing that with webcams right now, a remote version of that, basically.
Right. And then you can still limit, hey, if I'm hosting this week and I don't feel safe having more than a dozen people over, then I'm going to pick those dozen people versus walking into an LGS not knowing who is there and what they may or may not be carrying with them.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of that, and that makes sense. Jim Dean asks, if you could make a card or cards to make one underplayed commander or personal favorite more playable, what commander would you fix, and what would the additional cards look like? I tried to, there's 2 commanders, both Golgari, that I both like, and I was trying to kind of find a way to word this card so it would work with both of them. The cards are Farika, God of Affliction, and Sapling of Kolfanor. Farika's from the first Theros block, indestructible, and you can spend 2 mana to exile a creature card from a graveyard, but its owner puts a 1/1 black and green snake enchantment creature token with death touch onto the battlefield. I mean, that's just bad. You're giving your opponent's creatures, you're hitting their creatures from the graveyard, but if you got those snakes, it would still not be an amazing commander. But I like Farika. Sapling of Kolfanor is a 2/5 with indestructible, and when it attacks, you reveal the top card of your library, and if it's a creature card, you gain life equal to that card's toughness, and you lose life equal to its power. So I don't quite know, like, one of the things I was thinking was a companion that was in Golgari colors that had a requirement that said your commander must be indestructible. So it would work with both of them. And then I was trying to find a good way to make it also useful in both Sapling and Farika. The Farika clause, it would have to be something along the lines of whenever a token is created under an opponent's control, it comes into play under your control instead. So that would let you take control of the tokens, and it would be some kind of token hate for what other people do. And it might encourage you to run like goofy cards, like some of those old hunted cards that when it comes into play, your opponents get creatures. So it would kind of create its own weird archetype too. So I liked that idea. In Sapling, I thought, the variant on that, maybe you could put on the same card whenever you gain life, an opponent would lose that much life instead. Because part of the Sapling clause is you gain life, so then you could have a deck built around lifelink things and things to gain you life and hit your opponents with Sapling, because right now it's just kind of built as a really bad version of some kind of a tree folk tribal deck where you try to gain more life than you lose when it attacks. So I like both of those cards, and I tried to come up with something that you could pair with the same one card that would work with either of them. I'm not sure if you could do it quite right, but I like both of them, and I think there'll be something that could fix them both. I just can't quite put my finger on it. What do you have here, Max?
Well, earlier I mentioned Rexiel of the Hidden Deep
Yep.
being a commander I've always wanted to build. And I think Wizards has given me something close enough to help this deck, and that would be the newest companion, Gyruda, Doom of Depths, for Hybrid Damir. All your deck has to contain only even converted mana costs. And then when it ETBs, each player puts the top 4 of their library into their graveyard. Then you put a creature card with an even CMC cost from among those cards onto the battlefield under your control. I just don't like that Gyruda is 6 mana.
Yeah.
So like having a commander that's 6 mana and really hard to cast, and then having this other 6 mana companion alongside it, that just seems so intensive in a color combination that's not green and X.
Sure.
But something along the lines of Gyruda, but only caring about maybe instants and sorceries. But I really don't know. Like, I want to make Rexiel work somehow, I just don't know how to do it.
Okay. What's next here?
Han asked, which commanders or styles of decks are the most fun to play against? So my answer is going to be two-faced here. First, I'm going to say it kind of depends on my mood.
Sure.
Sometimes I'm in the mood for a really challenging game of Commander or Magic in general, and I really want to go up against that combo deck or that stacks deck and just see if I can beat the puzzle, because I look at those decks like puzzles. But I have to be in the mood to do that. That's not the last game of the night type of game, and it probably really isn't even the first game of the day type of deck I want to play against either. It's more that I just had lunch, I'm on like a carbo high, I'm ready to do it, I'm not sleepy anymore. But any other time, I love playing against aggro decks, creature heavy, hit you in the face. Whoever can put the more bodies on the battlefield is probably going to win this game type of deck, because that's kind of what our meta at home is like. We have a lot of just creature-based decks. So that's how kind of most of my decks are tuned. There are a lot of wraths. There's a lot of single-targeted removal. And being able to use those to save that 2 points of damage that might end me from the game, that's what I like to do. I like to be like, okay, if I turn these 3 creatures sideways and leave this one up, I'm going to survive unless they do XYZ. Those are the type of games I really enjoy.
For me, I do like that. I'm going to go with something a little more generic, maybe, or vague as an answer. I like seeing a deck that catches me off guard in terms of how it's built or what it's doing. We had a local player, Dr. Mike, who has a Clue treasure deck, and the first time I realized what it was, that kind of blew me away. I'm like, what is this? Oh my God, it's Clues and Treasure. That's insane. But it was super fun to see what the ridiculous concept he had. When I was in Chicago, somebody had a horror tribal deck. Same thing. I was like, are you kidding? Horror tribal? It was such a neat, unexpected concept. I love getting surprised by someone's super creative build. That's probably because I like to try to come up with those kind of things myself. So that's part of it. But that always really makes me happy when somebody surprises me with something that I have never seen before that's kind of personal to them. So that'll be my answer here.
Okay.
Hannah also asks, what are the win cons or ways you prefer to lose? For instance, I don't mind losing to Approach the Second Sun. It takes effort to build around, but it's still relatively quick. I like to lose to a person versus the cards, if that kind of makes sense. I like to feel like the person who beat me did things in a way that made them win based on either their deck building skill or their play skill or whatever, versus it's turn 10 and I top decked a Exsanguinate or something, or a Torment to Hailfire. And so known as a counterspell, I win. That always feels like, I guess you had to try to until turn 10 to do that, but it just always feels a little underwhelming. And it feels like I lost to a card versus losing to a player, maybe. And maybe that's just my perspective. I could be entirely wrong, but I'd much prefer to lose to somebody who's doing a thing that makes me feel like they outplayed me, or the clever deck they built beat me. How about you, Max?
I typically don't mind losing in general, but I think it has to do a lot with whatever happens during Rule 0. If you're going to tell me you're playing stacks and I'm okay with that, then cool, I'll lose to stacks if I lose to stacks. If you tell me you're playing combo, I'll lose to combo if I lose to combo, but don't be that player that says, hey, I'm playing combo and takes 15-minute turns.
Yes.
If you waste my time, no matter what archetype you're playing, because there are, and I'll give you a little bit of granted if you're a new player or something, but if you're playing a combo deck and you don't know how your combos work, I don't want to sit there 15 minutes every time it's your turn for you to figure out what you're trying to do. That's what I do not like to lose to, is people who waste my time when I probably could have gotten a game or a game and a half in the amount of time it took you to take 8 turns.
Yeah, I absolutely feel that.
Thias asked us, what deck would you love to make if the commander was less popular? We both look like we both have 2 answers. Surprisingly, they're both one card from the newest sets. So mine would be Zaxara, the new Hydra commander. And my other card would be the Dragon. I've always liked dragons. It's kind of up my alley. It's big stomping magic, and you get to cheat them into play. That sounds like a lot of fun. That's kind of scumbaggery right there. But it's still a very popular commander, and to be quite honest, dragons cost a lot of mana and money sometimes, so maybe one day.
I think for me, I mentioned Calmax is the first one on the list. I liked Calmax going in, but it's getting built so much right now out of Commander 2020 that I'm not building it. That's me being a dummy. But I can't shake it. It's just how my brain works. So it is what it is. I've accepted the fact that that's how I am. Regna and Krav is a pairing I liked a lot when I saw, and I drug my feet and didn't build it for no reason. And then you put it together, and I like your deck a lot too. And I'm obviously not going to build a deck that you have, but I've kind of always kicked myself for not being faster on putting that deck together, because I like the partners, I like the deck, the way you've got it built. So if for some reason you were erased from history in some kind of a sci-fi Doctor Who-ish,
Thanos snaps me.
There we go. Thanos snaps you and Max is gone. I would totally build right in Krav.
Well, thank you for the compliments on my deck.
You're welcome. The first thing I would do if you were erased from history by Thanos, Max, is not mourn. It would be to build a R&K deck.
Hey, everybody mourns differently.
Right, that would be how
differently.
I would mourn. What card in the last year can you still not believe they printed? Personal pick would be Thassa's Oracle. Thassa's Oracle, the one thing I'll say about it is it seems like it's just one more Labman variant. If you are the average person playing Magic, it's only when it becomes paired with something like Flash Hulk does it become super busted. So I guess I'm willing to forgive that, because it's not like it's a super obvious problem immediately in a bunch of different ways. Whereas I feel like about 2 seconds looking at Chulainn and Korvald should make you go, oh, these are going to be really, really strong in Commander without requiring you to do anything but put the same cards in your deck you'd want to put in those decks, in any deck with those colors. So I get why Thassa's Oracle is a problem, but I feel like that's an easy one to maybe miss, because it's like such a niche thing for it to be good. Whereas Chulainn and Korvald, they're just so obviously super, super strong. What do you think, Max?
I mean, I agree with you. Chulainn and Korvald are super strong. I don't think they're just... I think at first I was probably like, why were these printed? But
sure,
it's been a year.
Yeah.
Almost a year. And I think that shock and awe has worn off for me.
Sure.
For no specific reason that might be found out in the near future. But I don't know. I don't think there's any one card that I'm still thinking that. Like, I'm still to this day where it's like, why did they print that? Why did they print that? Yeah, I might say it about Chulainn or Korvald if I play it or play against it. Like, man, this was definitely a mistake, but I'm going to capitalize on that mistake, I guess, if I want to.
Sure.
I mean, it's up to us to say, hey, I don't want to personally play that card. There's probably not much you can do out in the wild to say, hey, I would prefer you don't play your Korvald deck, but, hopefully your opponents understand that, cool, you did it once, can you switch decks? Be nice about it. But I'm still honestly, Teferi's Protection, I'm still feeling the shock and awe about, and that was 3 years ago.
Yeah, no, that's... I hear that.
But yeah, unfortunately, I don't think anything in the last year still has me that impressed that why was this printed.
Okay.
Glenn Runyon asked, what is the most inspirational set to your own play style? So my answer is Battle Bond.
Oh, yeah.
Battle Bond was, 3 years ago, I want to say? 2 years ago?
2 years ago, I think now, yeah.
The first year we went to Vegas. So yeah, 2 years ago. I love the whole, arena, Thor Ragnarok, gladiator type
sure.
theme of the set. I love Partners With as a mechanic. I loved it from the minute it got previewed to the minute it got reprinted this year in Commander 20. I mean, I have Regna and Krav. I like the art. I like the sense of you're battling for your pride and everything. And I just feel like that's kind of how EDH is. You're battling against these competitors while people watch to prove that you're the best of the pod. You know what I mean? I really feel like it speaks to EDH, let alone all the cool reprints we got in it and cool new cards. But it gives me this EDH vibe, and I love playing EDH, and it just really resonates right with me.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was a big fan of that set as well, and that was one of the answers I had kind of considered here. For me, I didn't play during the set, but I am constantly, I find Time Spiral probably the one that's most it feels inspirational to me, because I love how just crazy they got with hey, let's give a land banding and flash and see what happens. Let's make this creature a sorcery and also give it rampage. Like it's just like the random, like, why not? Let's see what happens aspect of that was super cool. I liked Modern Horizons for that same reason too. Like, they didn't think if they should, they just did it because they could. And it created a lot of really neat cards that I really appreciate the fact that they exist. And it's things that you can't put anywhere else too. So Time Spiral mostly, but to a lesser extent Modern Horizons, the sheer amount of mechanics and how crazy it is really, really appeals to me and kind of appeals to how I like to build, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
What are your top 3 worst cards in Magic? I had a tough time with this one. I think ones that are frustrating to play against, I've mentioned this in the past, but it's probably been a long time now. Insurrection is not a broken card or anything. If anything, nowadays, 8 mana, trip red is a lot to hit. So I don't even see it that much anymore. But I remember early on in my EDH career losing multiple times to insurrections and losing to people who didn't do anything. Like, there'd be a game where like 3 people would be like just clocking one another back and forth, and somebody would have just hit nothing but like lands for 7 turns. And turn 8, they draw insurrection and drop a land. I'm like, I win? Because everyone else has 5 bodies out and they've been doming one another. So it's one of those cards that like you don't need to actually have done anything at all and you can just win the game. Those kind of cards in general kind of frustrate me, and it just so happens that Insurrection's one of the ones that I've had that done to me with a few times, so that's one that I just kind of detest for that reason. But I would say, just generally speaking, almost any card that does that, where like if you cast it, you can win the game regardless of what you've done up until that point. So I don't know if you want to, maybe Omniscience would count as that, I don't know, but those kind of cards are ones that are the kind of ones I tend to dislike the most. How about you, Max?
I don't like multiple hate bear effect type cards, so I'm fine with your Blind Obedience or your Council of Authorities. I think that's the one.
Yeah.
The 1 mana one from Aether Revolt. I should know this. I run both of them in one deck. But it's when you put all the other ones on top of it. Spirit of the Labyrinth, both Thalias, Grand Arbiter, Teague, when you combine them all and just make a miserable experience for the table.
Right.
Those right there just hit me in the feels to where it's like, come on, I'm here to play Magic. I don't get to play Magic if you play these cards.
When your deck's whole strategy is to keep people from playing anything.
Right. And I think there's a little bit of difference between a hate bear strategy and your 99 counterspell Baral deck.
Sure.
Granted, they're both evil in their own ways, but at least I can try casting a second spell against that Baral deck because they might not have that counterspell. Yeah. But if I'm only allowed 1 spell per turn, or all my lands come into play tapped, I'm essentially taking every other turn off.
Right.
Which isn't fun.
I totally feel that. All right, what is next?
Eric Landis asked, what is the coolest thing that has happened to us that would never have happened if not for the podcast? We pretty much have the same answer. I'm going to say the people I've met and have become very, very close friends with throughout this experience. So my notables would be Zach Taylor and Ryan Green from the Commander Social podcast, Dan Kraus, a friend of the show, friend of everybody's show, and Ginger Joe Hoffman, a friend of everybody's show. Those would probably be the 5 people I consider my newest, closest friends I've met through doing this. I mean, I flew to Austin right before all this COVID stuff happened to hang out with those guys for a long weekend. I would never have done that with random strangers on the internet.
Right,
you know what
exactly.
I mean?
Yeah, like just getting a chance to meet people outside of, because like meeting people that you share an interest with is great to do, but it tends to be tricky in your geographic area. Having access to the entire country, however, where you can meet people that you share interests with and then like get to play games with them has been a huge thing. And I agree, talking about Zach and Ryan or Brando and Ryan or, Matt and Joey and the EDH Recast, getting to be friends with those guys has been pretty amazing. Or Rafael Garcia or Dan Kraus, or like I'm missing, I'm no offense to anyone whose name I've forgotten or just didn't mention because this list is so long, but like even like Eric asked this question, gotten to play a couple games with Eric at Vegas last year and talking to him on the internet. Eric's a super cool guy and he's now doing some podcasting and I've listened to that show. Or Cam and Camera last year from Canada last year coming down to Vegas and bringing Canadian candy to us.
He brought all the candy. Yeah.
Like stuff like that. that's has been a fantastic experience. Or, EDH Rec, writing for EDH Rec, and part of the reason I got to do that in the first place was doing this podcast. And then I've met, I mentioned Matt and Joey, but like Don Miner, I never would have met if it wasn't for writing for EDH Rec. And Don is a great guy.
Don is super cool. I mean, everybody we've listed, you've listed, I've listed, are super cool, and I agree. Apologies to anybody we didn't mention.
Because it's a long list. But I totally agree. It's a chance to meet people that I never would have met and play Magic with them and just get to know them a little bit has been heads and shoulders above anything else why this has made my life better for sure.
And, I'm going to add one more thing. I think something that I don't speak enough on is the fact that doing this podcast has brought me out of my shell. I would never walk up to random strangers and be like, hey, can I play EDH with you at our LGS? And I know 80% of the people that go to that shop. I would be the person that would wait till a pod opens with people I know. But because we walk into a convention center and someone hears our voice and says, hey, are you Max and Dana from CMDR Central and EDH Recast? We're recognized, and I'm not trying to sound arrogant or anything, but it's so weird hearing this complete stranger that you've never met, probably have talked to on the internet through Twitter or a Discord, being like, oh, hey, I'm this person. We talk. I'm like, oh, it's finally nice to put a name to the face, and you just build these bonds, which I never would have done this prior to podcasting.
That covers it all. A couple more here. John Egner asks, he loves the Ikoria lore of a human bonding with another animal. It's flavorful and relatable for pet and or animal lovers. What legendary human and non-human would you give partner to represent this bond? That's pretty specific. I couldn't think of like two exact things, but the one that jumped out at me was I think Talrand should have a favorite Drake. And if we got another Talrand card, I would love to see that have kind of the Ikoria bond where it's a partner with whatever his favorite pet Drake would be. Something along those lines I would totally play.
Very nice. Mine would be Tajik from the Boros Guild, and I feel like he would have like a goblin companion that is kind of working for him in like the Tin Street area, making sure Kranko isn't up to no good or anything like that. I would love to see something like that.
Nick Cooper, if you were at a picnic and had to choose between potato salad and macaroni salad, which would you choose and why, assuming both are homemade? I don't like either. My family makes potato salad and macaroni salad for a lot of like summer events when the family's together. And if I remember correctly, I had a bad experience when I was young where I bit into a bite that was like warm or had been out in the sun, like something dumb like that.
Yeah.
And it's forever ruined the idea of me having either of those two things. If I had to choose, I would go with macaroni salad, but because of a bad experience in the past, I do not like either.
There's a reason we're buddies, because I am going to say the same thing. I despise both, to be honest. If I had to choose, I would choose a German potato salad. For those who don't know, it's like a vinegar-based potato salad versus a mayonnaise one, so it's made with like more of a red potato and like ham and onions and like this sweet vinegar sauce, so it can be eaten warm or cold. So like my family will make it in the winter as a hot meal versus like scalloped potatoes and ham.
Okay.
And then in the summer, my grandparents will make it as a cold side dish for like a picnic.
Nice. Okay. That was a question I was not ready for.
Haha.
Morris asks us, with the uptick of Commander via webcam, what would your opinions be about regularly scheduling games with listeners? So we want to try to do this. I was actually going to try to get something done this week, but I had a couple things at work came up, so I didn't get around to it. So I'll say right now, this show's going to air on the 11th. So the week of the 11th, I'm going to try to get a few things scheduled out. So the week after this airs with people, try to get some games in on the Saturday the 29th and Saturday the 23rd and Saturday the 30th. So we'll reach out to a few people and come up with some kind of a system where people can sign up or something. So that is going to that'll go down sooner rather than later, like in the next week or so. We'll get a few listeners scheduled for games on webcam for sure.
Cool. Thanks for handling that one.
You bet.
Morris also asked, with companions running rampant in other formats, do you believe it'll be a net negative for EDH, or might the Commander-esque play draw more people in? Honestly, I'm currently kind of building a deck that uses a companion, and it wasn't hard to build around. I mean, I'm building a deck that uses Karuga, so that's the companion that all your non-land cards have to be 3 CMC or greater. I mean, I think certain companions kind of scream EDH, like Karuga. That just means play big spells and have fun.
Sure.
The other ones where your entire deck has to be odd or even, that's a little more fine-tuned and you have to play around with it some more. I think it just comes down to the individual and how much you really want to brew. I don't see them taking over Commander like they are in Standard and Pioneer and Modern and Legacy, just because they get 4 copies of it. They can put 3 in the main board and 1 in the sideboard, and you always have a companion.
Yep.
It's a one and done thing in Commander. It doesn't go back to that pseudo command zone if it dies. It goes to your graveyard.
The games take a lot longer. That one thing is way less impactful, I think.
Right. Do I think it'll transition people to Commander? Probably, but I don't think it's going to be a negative for Commander at all.
Yeah, I don't either. Will it drive people to play Commander that aren't already doing it? I mean, Commander's already the most popular format. I don't know if there's that much room to drive people to Commander that aren't already into it, at least a little bit. So maybe it will convert a few people, but I think that's, man, they're by and large already converted in pretty large amounts, I think. Last but not least, from our editor, Rafael Garcia, if you could pick one beast to be eroded to bear or card to make bear tokens, what would you choose? Way to stay on brand, Rafael.
Heck yeah.
I mean, hey, isn't in his own way Garruk already a bear?
Oh, you already took mine.
So there we go. Garruk Wildspeaker, definitely, I think, consensus agrees, he is for sure a bear. That is going to wrap up episode 200. Thank you all for listening, and thank you for letting us get to 200 episodes. We couldn't have done it without all of you out there in listener land. We really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, everybody. This has been a great 2.5 years, I think.
Yeah.
This will be year 3 in August. So yeah, it's been a great 2.5 years on this journey with everybody listening. And you, Dana, it's been a blast. You know, we had a little stint before this show. So, I mean, it's been almost like 4 years for us.
I think so, yeah.
But I mean, I don't see any signs of us slowing down. And when all this social distancing stuff is back, you know, Chris will be back with us and filling your ear holes with his laughter.
We'll be 300 episodes isn't too far away, that means. So
right. I mean, hopefully this will be ended by the time we hit 300.
Yes. Oh, wow. Yeah, no, good point for sure. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thank you very much to our editor, Rafael Garcia, for editing this slightly longer than the usual show. You can find him on Twitter at Ursa Bearwalker. You can find me at Dana Roach. You can find Max at CMDR Central _Max. And you can find Chris at Wise Squishy One. Our podcast theme is Retro Future Dirty by Kevin MacLeod, licensed via Creative Commons. And we will not be back on Thursday this week with the Deck Tech. We're taking the week off. We'll be back the week after. So until then, I'm Dana.
And I'm Max.